Okay, so video 3, week 1. And this, my friends, is what we call Leighton doing the essay question for you. Because if you look at the question on Gutenberg in your module handbook, the focus on it is on the effect of print. And look at this. I'm going to give you 11 effects of the print revolution. And I'm going to do it right now. It's crazy. I'm so good to you guys. It just blows my mind. So, number 1, end of scribal culture. Yes. Now, handwritten texts survived for the elite in society, but there was a boom in demand for print and falling prices, which established its dominance. So by 1470, scribes and scriptoria were disappearing. The very discipline of being a scribe itself started to fall out of favour. Illuminators and illustrators started to lose their positions. And, those skills were not lost, but they were reincorporated into the print revolution. And what this signaled was the end of church dominance and control of social knowledge. And my friends, that's huge. That is huge. The printing press ended the dominance of the Catholic Church in Europe in terms of social knowledge and control of people. That's massive. That is like the biggest thing ever in a billion years. Yeah, huge. And thanks to the printing press. Absolutely huge. The end of scribal culture, the end of church production equals an erosion of church power, equals the end of church dominance over knowledge. Within that, then, of course, you get an expansion of knowledge. So there were more books, they were cheaper, they were spread, and they spread the availability of knowledge to people. So printers really aimed for what they called mass tastes: alchemy, astrology, hermetic law, all crap, all bullshit, right? But printers do that today. Self-help books, Harry Potter, it's all nonsense, but those are the things that sell, right? What printers also did was spread the renaissance of culture and scientific knowledge, and established the Renaissance ideas of reason and science as being the basis for human knowledge through the printed word. And the availability of error-free books spurred new work and ideas in fields like science, but also the establishment of entirely new disciplines like politics, for example, which didn't exist before the printing press, because the church controlled social knowledge, and having people who were politically knowledgeable wasn't a very good idea for the church. That sort of thing comes around with the expansion of knowledge of the printing press. The printing press became a huge force for change because printers became important cultural and political forces in their own right. They had a new power to address everyone in society, and in those societies' own languages as well, rather than just in Latin. So this has formed basis for new debates about politics and power, leading to close control of printers and censorship in many countries, but also illicit trade in sort of illegal or dangerous books became a big thing as well. So there was a direct challenge to power from printing as well, and printing held power to account in very important ways, which I'll get into more next week. But the printing press itself became a force for change in its own right. You saw the emergence of new literary forms, not just factual books and pamphlets, but for example, Michel de Montaigne in France invented a new form, the essay. Indeed, his first work, The Essays, was published in 1580, a means to tell us his life and opinions. I'm asking you to do 2 essays for this module, and you can blame the printing press for that, people, because the essay didn't exist before the printing press. It just didn't happen. The church had no interest in publishing essays, right? With the printing press, essays could be published and distributed. In 1554, an unknown Spanish author would publish the first modern novel, The Life of Lazarillo de Tormes. The novel itself didn't exist before the printing press. There was no such thing. And you think, what has the novel achieved? Well, without the novel, there's no cinema. There's no, elongated story form, all those favourite novels that you guys have, because I know you read vociferously. Can you hear the sarcasm dripping out of my voice? Only joking. Yeah, without the printing press, there would be no such thing. The novel just simply did not exist. Quite surprisingly, perhaps you might think, that the printing press promoted nationalism, because there were markets for books in particular vernaculars, particular languages. This promoted a national identity, connecting nations together by shared language, helped fix language differences, regional dialects. It actually gave a standard form to written language in itself, which meant you could fix the language and therefore fix identity. If you identified your nationality with the language you spoke, you now had a commonality to that nationality. Aided the bureaucratic rise of the nation state. People could, the nation state itself can now keep records on people. They could have, cheaply produced information about people. And this could be very, very controversial in itself as well, when, the production of books in particular languages actually is responsible for a number of wars. Now, Tyndale, for example, who printed the first English translation of the Bible in 1526, he smuggled that translation into England at the risk of death because the church in England did not want the Bible printed in the English language. There were 18,000 copies sold cheaply in 6 editions over 3 years, but he was declared an outlaw and heretic for going against the law. And you know what happens to heretics. 1536, Tyndale met his end. An important influence on the development of English language and culture, and indeed of Protestantism as well. And he was hugely important in the struggle against the Catholic Church and the development of the Protestant Church. The printing press formalized grammar. Grammar before the printing press could be all over the place. People would write in the way that they wanted to write, and the grammar would reflect that, and it was shambolic. Nobody ever made a grammatical error in a non-literate society, according to Marshall McLuhan, because there was no standardized grammar. You couldn't make one because it didn't exist. So the printing press helped establish rules of punctuation and grammar as standard, gave languages coherence and a fixity, lovely word, no, fixity, that languages lacked. There was now an emphasis on correct presentation, organization, and the look of a text for the first time ever, which standardized communication for us. And I talk about, your essays, right? Double space them, use this font, blah, 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 wah, 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 wah. That comes from the printing press, my friends. I am just following what the printing press did, I'm a student of media history. Promoted individualism. You think, what? Of course it did. Well, you're unshackling people from the confines of the church, firstly, but also allowing them, first time ever in most people's lives at this point, to consume knowledge in private. Knowledge previously had been imparted through the church, through preachers, through, priests, etc. Now you could have books which you could read on your own. Ooh, exciting. The idea of the individual man starts to become a thing, or lady, right? So in the Gutenberg Galaxy of 1962, McLuhan makes this argument, argued that manuscript culture was still largely oral as they were read out. Print was privatizing. It was read alone, silently. He developed personal interpretation of knowledge from a single named author for the first time. As I said earlier, books were not authored previously. Now you could attach ideas to people. And that means you can have movements based on people and their ideas for the first time in history. The printing press anticipated the Industrial Revolution because its methods of production were those which would be copied by the Industrial Revolution. So break from artisanal hand production and craft, early industrial production which mechanized the book process, serial reproduction of identical consumer objects is a classic of, I don't know why I've got a bunny there, is a classic of the Industrial Revolution. This is what the Industrial Revolution achieved and ushered in the first era of mass production of consumable goods. And this would all happen in the Industrial Revolution too, but Gutenberg was doing it like 300 years before then. Wow. Created, of course, the first mass medium. It allowed a media object to be mass produced for mass distribution and mass consumption. This is the birth of broadcasting. This is exactly what broadcasting did in the 20th century, but Gutenberg was doing it hundreds of years before that. Now, broadcasting is an 18th century agricultural term, but the era of broadcast mass media begins with mechanical type printed books in 1450. So the first mass medium is the printed book. Most importantly, I think, it created literate man. McLuhan argued that printing culture created a literate culture where the aims of human beings changed themselves. And this is really the most important McLuhanist point, I think, from the printing press indeed. The individual aim of being well-read, educated and informed became an actual aim in society. It just didn't exist before the printing press. To do that, you were able to use reason, to question and to debate people. And therefore, we see the emergence of politics. Literacy became a mark of civilization, and that itself pushed knowledge forwards as well. And European society exited the Dark Ages into the Renaissance on the back of the printing press and the creation of literate man. Now, if you look at a book, you have uniform line and words, sequential presentation, linear, logical development of arguments. That all comes from the form that was produced by the printing press. We still use that form in order to express argument today. And this is the hallmark of literate man. And literacy had a set of values attached to it. The values of literacy were internalized by people. The individual ruled by values of logic, uniformity, identicality, linearity, sequentiality, logic, rationality, rather than the ramblings of the Bible, for example. Okay, so what did the printing press do? It recreated human beings into literate human beings, which had an entirely different set of values, an entirely different set of aims, entirely different knowledge, an entirely different way of existing in the world. Huge. Humanity itself changed with the printing press. And that is really what McLuhan says when we say the medium is the message. For the printing press, the message is mankind changed into literate man. So printing is actually intrinsically linked really with political change. Now, printing is intrinsically linked here with the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther nailing it up into the wall. Nailed it, dude. Luther's movement, the 16th century protest and reformist movement within the Catholic Church, which would split the Catholic Church, leading to many Protestant churches. Printing played a central role in that split itself. Printing was, even the 95 theses that Luther nailed up onto the cathedral door, they were printed documents. Okay, so the Catholic Church in the 16th century, the dominant ideological institution and a medium in itself. The Catholic Church was a medium. It, it broadcast, if you like, it broadcast a particular worldview. It was I'll say it in a second, hierarchical institution disseminating a single message to the masses using the technology that which ostensibly was people, right? People who could talk and speak to the masses. And it was the appointed mediator of our relationship with the big man himself. The Catholic Church had a relationship with printing. The first popular printed text was the Bible, and the Catholic Church was on board for that. Religious texts were an important market, and the Church actually welcomed printing when it started because it could spread their message better and unify Christendom with a single Bible rather than differently produced Bibles by different scribes. Now, if you look at Johann Tetzel, in 1515, Pope Leo X wanted to rebuild St. Peter's Basilica in Rome and authorized an indulgence to raise money for that. Tetzel, a Dominican monk and papal commissioner for indulgences, was sent to Germany to sell indulgences. The couplets, his materialism and the claims of this, I'm not going to talk about the couplet here, but you can look that up if you like. Tetzel's claim for indulgences, give the church money to do this, appalled Martin Luther. Luther was a monk in Wittenberg in Saxony and believed only God could offer forgiveness. Tetzel set up shop 30 kilometers away over the Saxony border, and really his presence close to Luther kind of powered Luther's thought at this time, and coupled with the printing press led to something extraordinary. Luther's letter containing 95 disputation points to Tetzel leaked, and the story is of it being nailed to the door of Wittenberg Church. But the 95 Theses were his arguments against this sort of papal order in order to give indulgences for the rebuilding of the basilica. That changed everything. That changed Europe. It smashed the monopoly of the Catholic Church in itself. It cannot be underestimated the social changes that emerged from that very simple notion. And it was through the power of the printing press being able to produce those documents in the first place and for them to be distributed, reprinted, redistributed, that you have the emergence of an entirely different church order, Protestantism, which has become endemic across Western Europe. It's incredible. So the threat of print was really to establish power hierarchies who relied on limiting knowledge and debate in their societies. Print allowed people to read for themselves and therefore to think for themselves, to gain individual knowledge, be able to think and to debate and ask questions. The church now did take part in debates, publishing their own responses, but that only added to public discussion. You know, you could take contrary positions to the church, which was unheard of. Eventually, the Catholic Church would try banning and burning books. Yeah, they would. But the medium was way out of control by then, and it was, you know, the genie's out of the bottle. You cannot stop the flood once it's started. More copies could always, and more books could always be printed using this system. Therefore, it was too late. Catholic Church had lost this battle. So what did the print revolution achieve? Printing liberated information. It expanded who could read and therefore who could know things, and encouraged ordinary people to have and debate knowledge itself. The significance of the printing press is only surpassed by one invention, the computer. And we've got a whole bunch of things to get through before we get to the computer at the end of this module, but you know, I'm foreshadowing here. The computer is incredibly important, but the most significant medium in history, with the exception of the computer, is the printing press, because of those things. You know, because it made information available, it transformed human beings, and it encouraged us to have the kind of society that we have today, an open society when people can know the things that they want to know and debate with one another. Those things did not exist before the printing press. So, to borrow from our good friend William Merrin, while the printing press impacted upon the mechanics of production and upon the process of distribution and consumption, it only had a limited effect on who could actually produce and distribute. The computer, however, had the potential to democratize production and empower the user to create a well-programmed computer. A well-programmed computer can provide direct access to both the information resources and the processes for making use of the resources. So the argument really is, the computer goes a step further than the printing press. Printing press was amazing in terms of democratization of knowledge. The computer allows us to create as well. That's the kind of argument which we'll follow. Just before we finish this video, and you think, oh my God, the Catholic Church tried to burn books, what is going on, you know? We still have fear of public information today. Those things have not ended. You try and get Freedom of Information Act off the government, you know, use the Freedom of Information Act in order to get anything on documents that the government have. It's a nightmare. So there is still a fear of the public and a fear of public information today. But the printing press, more than any other medium in the history of humankind, started to pull down that wall for us and actually allow us to become what we are and what we are today. Okay, thanks guys. Next week I will look at early, and I do mean early, newspapers. Cheers.